Cyber Threat Brief for May 14, 2026. Microsoft patched 138 vulnerabilities, including critical remote code execution flaws in DNS and NetLogin, but 2 Windows 0 days already have public exploits. Yellow key bypasses BitLocker encryption even on systems with TPM and PIN protection, while green plasma escalates privileges to system level. The Gentleman Ransomware Gang leaked internal data exposing their operations, affiliate model, and toolsets used against 332 victims this year. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Next section, critical alerts. Windows BitLocker 0-day bypasses encryption, yellow key. A publicly disclosed 0-day named yellow key allows attackers with physical access to bypass BitLocker encryption on Windows 11 and Windows Server 2022/2025 systems. The vulnerability exploits a component present only in the Windows recovery environment, WinRe, that processes specially crafted FSTX files, triggering NTFS transaction replays that delete critical recovery files and spawn a command shell with access to encrypted volumes. Security researcher Chaotic Eclipse published proof-of-concept code demonstrating the attack, which works by placing malicious files on a USB drive or the EFI partition, rebooting into WinRe, and holding control to spawn a shell. Multiple independent researchers, including Kevin Beaumont and Will Dorman, confirmed the exploit works on recent Windows 11 builds. The researcher claims the vulnerability also works on systems configured with TPM and PIN protection, but withheld that proof-of-concept code. This is tracked as CVE 2026-33825 and was added to CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known exploited vulnerabilities catalog with a remediation deadline of May 6. EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system, score is 0. 49 90th percentile. Action, apply available Windows security updates immediately. As temporary mitigation, use BitLocker PIN and BIOS password. Restrict physical access to systems and disable automatic Win reboot. Monitor for unauthorized USB device connections. The vulnerability was publicly disclosed on May 13 with working exploit code, dramatically shortening the window before active exploitation. Sources: Bleeping Computer Security Week. Windows Privilege Escalation 0-day, green plasma. The same researcher disclosed a second 0-day, named Green Plasma, that allows attackers to escalate privileges to system level on Windows systems. The vulnerability involves manipulating Windows services, including kernel mode drivers, through arbitrary memory section object creation in directories writable by system. While the researcher published only a limited proof of concept that strips full system shell functionality, security researchers warn the code provides sufficient foundation for attackers to develop weaponized exploits. Full exploitation could enable attackers to disable endpoint protections, manipulate trusted processes, deploy malware with system privileges, or use compromised machines as pivot points for lateral movement across enterprise networks. Action, monitor for privilege escalation attempts and unexpected system-level process creation. Apply Windows security updates as soon as Microsoft releases patches. Implement application whitelisting and monitor for suspicious service manipulation. The researcher has threatened to release additional 0-day exploits on future Patch Tuesdays, indicating a pattern of adversarial disclosures. Sources: Bleeping Computer Security Week. Critical Outlook Zero-Click Remote Code Execution. CVE 2026-40361. Microsoft patched a critical zero-click use-after-free vulnerability in Outlook that allows remote code execution without user interaction. The flaw resides in a DLL dynamic link library used heavily by both Word and Outlook, affecting Outlook's email rendering engine. Exploitation occurs automatically when a victim reads or previews a malicious email, requiring no clicks on links or attachments. Security researcher Hefei Lai, who discovered the vulnerability, compared it to the 2015 bad windmail vulnerability, CVE 2015-6172, that he previously dubbed an enterprise killer, because it allowed anyone to compromise executives simply by sending an email. The attack perfectly bypasses enterprise firewalls and is delivered directly to the inbox. EPSS score is 0. 1 18th percentile, but Microsoft assigned an exploitation more likely rating. Action, deploy Microsoft's May 2026 Patch Tuesday updates immediately, prioritizing Exchange servers and Outlook clients. As temporary mitigation, configure Outlook to render emails only in plain text format. File Options Trust Center Email Security Read as plain text. Monitor for unusual email-triggered processes. The vulnerability poses particular risk to executives and high-value targets. Source: Security Week. Next section, ransomware claims, last 48H. No structured ransomware victim claims data available in today's collection. Next section, ransomware and extortion. The Gentleman RAS internal database, leaked. The Gentleman Ransomware as a Service operation suffered a security breach that exposed internal communications, toolsets, and operational details after compromising approximately 332 organizations in the first 5 months of 2026. On May 4, the group's administrator acknowledged that an internal backend database had been leaked, with anonymous attackers now selling over 16 gigabytes of internal data for $10,000 in Bitcoin. Leaked material includes conversations between the RAS administrator, Zeta88, also known as Hastelamware, and affiliates detailing initial access methods, division of roles, shared toolsets, and active tracking of CVEs, including CVE 2024-55591. CISAKEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, EPSS 0.941, CISAKEV due June 30, EPSS 0.471, and CISAKEV due November 10, EPSS 0.453. The leak reveals the group's generous affiliate payment model, where Zeta88 takes 10% and affiliates split the remaining 90%, explaining the operation's rapid growth to become the second most productive RAS program in 2026. Internal chats show a successful negotiation where the group received $190,000 after demanding $250,000, and evidence of dual pressure tactics where stolen data from a UK software consultancy was reused to attack a Turkish company. And 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action. Patch Fortinet, Cisco, and other edge appliances immediately. Harden against NTLM relay attacks and credential theft from OWA/M365. The Gentleman targets IT infrastructure and uses EDR kill packages including bring your own vulnerable driver techniques. Organizations using Fortinet, Cisco, and Microsoft Exchange should prioritize hardening and credential monitoring. Review detection rules for system BC command and control activity and EDR evasion techniques. Sources: Checkpoint Research. Dark reading. Foxconn confirms Nitrogen ransomware attack. Foxconn, the world's largest electronics manufacturer with over 900,000 employees and $260 billion in 2025 revenues, confirmed that some North American factories were hit by a cyber attack claimed by the Nitrogen ransomware gang. The threat actors claim to have stolen 8 terabytes of data representing over 11 million documents, including confidential instructions, projects, and drawings from major customers including Apple, Intel, Google, NVIDIA, and AMD. The company's cybersecurity team activated response mechanisms and implemented operational measures to ensure production continuity, with affected factories currently resuming normal operations. This marks the 4th major ransomware incident for Foxconn in recent years, following attacks by Lockbit, January 2024 and May 2022, and Doppelpaymer, December 2020, which demanded $34 million after allegedly encrypting up to 1,400 servers. Action. Organizations in the electronics manufacturing supply chain should review data handling agreements with Foxconn and assess potential exposure of confidential designs, specifications, and intellectual property. The Nitrogen ransomware gang has a known coding mistake in its EXE malware that encrypts files with the wrong public key, irreversibly corrupting them. Ensure EXE hosts are isolated, patched, and monitored for encryption activity. Sources: Bleeping Computer Security Week. Device code phishing campaigns. Surge credential phishing has evolved beyond traditional MFA, multi-factor authentication, bypass techniques to device code phishing, which exploded across the threat landscape following the release of criminal toolkits in fall 2025 and the emergence of multiple phishing-as-a-service offerings, including Evil Tokens and Tycoon. Proofpoint researchers report that most identified activity uses vibe-coded techniques, with threat actors either copying and modifying publicly known tools or using similar LLM prompts to generate nearly identical attack flows. The attacks abuse the OAuth 2.0 device authorization grant flow to compromise Microsoft 365 accounts by tricking users into approving access for attacker-controlled applications. Current implementations generate codes dynamically when users click phishing links, solving the previous limitation of 15-minute code expiration windows. Campaigns frequently leverage account takeover jumping, where attackers compromise an initial email account and use it to send phishing links to a wide set of contacts. Successful attacks lead to full account takeover, sensitive data theft, business email compromise, lateral movement, and ransomware deployment. Action. Implement conditional access policies to restrict device code flows in Microsoft 365. Monitor for unusual OAuth application approvals and device authorization requests. Train users to recognize device code phishing lures that request entering codes at Microsoft. com/devicelogin. Block or alert on URLs associated with known FAS platforms. Review existing OAuth application permissions for unauthorized applications with broad access scopes. Source: Proofpoint Threat Insight. Next section, Business and Infrastructure Threats. Iranian APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, targets South Korean electronics manufacturer the Iran-linked Muddy Water Threat Group, also known as Seedworm Static Kitten, conducted a cyber espionage campaign that spent a week inside the network of a major South Korean electronics manufacturer in February 2026. The campaign targeted at least 9 high-profile organizations across multiple sectors and countries, including government agencies, an international airport in the Middle East, industrial manufacturers in Asia, and educational institutions. Symantec researchers assess the attacker's motivation as intelligence-driven, focusing on industrial and intellectual property theft, government espionage, and access to downstream customers or corporate networks. The attack relied heavily on DLL sideloading using legitimate signed software including ForMedia's FMAP, EXE Audio Utility, and SentinelOne's Sentinel Memory Scanner. EXE, malicious DLL's loaded Chrome Elevator, a commodity post-exploitation tool that steals data from Chrome-based browsers. PowerShell was still heavily used, but controlled through Node.js loaders rather than directly. The attackers maintained 90-second beaconing intervals, leveraged SendIt.sh for data exfiltration to blend with normal traffic, and stole credentials via fake Windows prompts, registry hive theft, SAM/security/system, and Kerbero's ticket abuse. Action: audit for unexpected DLL files alongside legitimate ForMedia and SentinelOne binaries. Monitor for Node.js child processes spawned from PowerShell and unusual PowerShell execution patterns. Block or monitor SendIt.sh and similar file sharing services at the network perimeter. Review Kerbero's ticket requests for anomalies and implement credential guard protections. Organizations in electronics manufacturing, government, industrial sectors, and educational institutions should prioritize these detections. Source: Bleeping Computer. China-linked Famous Sparrow targets Azerbaijani energy sector. The China-linked Famous Sparrow APT group targeted an Azerbaijani oil and gas company in the South Caucasus region between late December 2025 and the end of February 2026, marking the first time China-aligned threat actors have been discovered in Azerbaijani industries. Bitdefender researchers observed the group using a unique 2-stage DLL sideloading technique that gates payloads behind specific execution paths, allowing malware to run only if applications follow expected instruction sequences. This makes analysis and sandbox detection more difficult, as individual components show no malicious behavior when examined separately. The attackers installed an improved version of the DEAD-RAT remote access tool. While operational technology, OT networks were not affected, the targeting represents China-aligned APTs pushing into Russia's traditional sphere of influence. The South Caucasus region has become an increasingly important energy corridor for the European Union, serving 16 nations with gas exports that have grown 56% over the past 5 years. Action: organizations in the energy sector, particularly oil and gas, should implement enhanced monitoring for DLL sideloading techniques and multi-stage payload execution. Review endpoint detection rules for behaviors that only manifest when components execute in specific sequences. Monitor for DEAD-RAT indicators and unusual remote access tool installations. Energy companies in geopolitically sensitive regions should assume increased targeting from both Russian and Chinese APT groups. Source: Dark Reading. Next section, Windows/Active Directory Security. Microsoft May 2026 Patch Tuesday. 138 vulnerabilities. Microsoft released patches for 138 security vulnerabilities spanning its product portfolio, with 30 rated critical, 104 rated important, 3 rated moderate, and 1 rated low severity. None of the vulnerabilities are listed as publicly known or under active attack at the time of release. The patches include 61 privilege escalation bugs, 32 remote code execution flaws, 15 information disclosure issues, 14 spoofing vulnerabilities, 8 denial of service bugs, 6 security feature bypass issues, and 2 tampering flaws. Key critical vulnerabilities include CVE 2026-41096, CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, 9.8, a heap-based buffer overflow in Windows DNS that allows unauthenticated remote code execution via specially crafted DNS responses, CVSS 9.8, stack-based buffer overflow in Windows NetLogin that allows unauthenticated RCE by sending a specially crafted network request to a domain controller. CVSS 10.0, an information disclosure in Azure DevOps requiring no customer action. CVSS 9.9, improper access control in Azure Managed Instance for Apache Cassandra. CVSS 9.9, code injection in Microsoft Dynamics 365 on-premises. And CVSS 9.3, use after free in Windows Hyper-V, allowing system privilege escalation and access to the Hyper-V host environment. And 5 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action. Prioritize patching domain controllers, CVE 2026-41089 NetLogin RCE, DNS servers, Hyper-V hosts, and Exchange/Outlook clients. Azure services including DevOps, Logic Apps, Managed Instance for Apache Cassandra, and Entra ID received automatic patches requiring no customer action. Test patches in development environments before production deployment, particularly for domain controllers and DNS infrastructure. All EPSS scores for the disclosed CVEs are below 0. 1, indicating low immediate exploitation probability, but critical rated RCE vulnerabilities in core infrastructure should be patched within 7 days, and 3 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Source: The Hacker News. Microsoft fixes BitLocker recovery issue on Windows 11. Only Microsoft addressed a known issue, causing some Windows 11 systems to boot into BitLocker recovery after installing the April 2026 security updates. KB 5,083,769. The issue affects systems with an unrecommended BitLocker group policy configuration, specifically those using the Configure TPM platform validation profile for native UEFI firmware configurations. Policy with invalid PCR7, Platform Configuration Register 7, settings. Microsoft released a permanent fix only for Windows 11 25H2 via the KB 5,089,549 cumulative update. Windows 10 and Windows Server customers must wait for a future update. Until fixes are available, Windows administrators should remove the problematic group policy configuration before deploying April 2026 updates and ensure BitLocker bindings use the PCR7 profile correctly. This marks the 5th significant BitLocker recovery issue since August 2022, following similar problems in August 2024 and May 2025 that required out-of-band emergency updates. Action. Apply KB 5,089,549 to Windows 11 25H2 systems immediately. For Windows 10 and Windows Server, remove the Configure TPM platform validation profile for native UEFI firmware configurations, group policy, before deploying April 2026 updates. Ensure BitLocker recovery keys are accessible and documented before patching. Test updates in non-production environments first. The recurring nature of BitLocker recovery issues suggests establishing a patch validation process specifically for BitLocker-enabled systems. Source: Bleeping Computer. Next section, Vulnerability Disclosures. The vulnerability stems from a logic bug in the Linux XFRM ESB and TCP subsystem and affects all Linux kernels released before May 13, 2026. Security researcher William Bowling of Zellick disclosed the flaw along with a proof-of-concept exploit that achieves a memory write primitive in the kernel, used to corrupt the page cache memory of the /usr/bin/su binary to obtain a root shell. Fragnesia belongs to the Dirty Frag vulnerability class disclosed last week, which chains 2 separate kernel flaws, XFRMESB and RxRPC, to achieve privilege escalation. Unlike Dirty Frag's race condition requirements, Fragnesia abuses a logic bug without requiring any race condition, making exploitation more reliable, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action. Apply kernel updates immediately for all Linux distributions. For systems that cannot be patched immediately, remove vulnerable kernel modules with rmmod esp4 esp6rxrpc and create persistent mitigation with print install esp4/bin/false/ninstall esp6/bin/false/ninstall rxrpc/bin/false/n/etc/modprobe d/dirtifrag. Conf. Note this mitigation breaks AFS distributed network file systems and ISEC VPNs. Schedule kernel updates within 48 hours to restore full functionality. This disclosure comes as Linux distributions are still patching copy-fail, added to CIS a KEV on May 1 with a May 15 remediation deadline, and pack to the root, patched in April after going unnoticed for a decade. Source: Bleeping Computer. Critical Exim Mail Server RCE, CVE 2026-45185. A critical vulnerability in the EXIM open-source mail transfer agent allows unauthenticated remote code execution on certain configurations using the default GNU Transport Layer security. GNU TLS library. CVE 2026-45185 is a use-after-free flaw triggered during TLS shutdown while handling BDAT chunked SMTP traffic. EXIM frees a TLS transfer buffer, but continues using stale callback references that write data into freed memory, leading to unauthenticated RCE. The vulnerability impacts EXIM versions 4.97 through 4.99.2 on builds compiled with GNU TLS that have startles and chunking advertised. OpenSSL-based builds are not affected. Attackers exploiting the vulnerability could execute commands on the server, access EXIM data and emails, and potentially pivot into the environment. Expo researcher Federico Kirschbaum discovered and reported the vulnerability on May 1, with a fix released in EXIM version 4.99.3. Expo documented an interesting development race where their autonomous AI system, Expo Native, created a working exploit for a simplified target without ASLR, and an LLM-assisted human researcher won the race for a production target with ASLR enabled. EPSS score is 0. 1, 18th percentile. Action: update to EXIM 4.99.3 immediately on all Ubuntu and Debian-based Linux distributions running mail servers. Verify EXIM builds compiled with GNU TLS are patched first, as OpenSSL builds are not vulnerable. Monitor mail server logs for unusual BDAT SMTP commands and TLS handshake anomalies. EXIM is widely deployed in shared hosting environments, enterprise mail systems, and is the default mail server on Debian and Ubuntu distributions. Organizations using these platforms for email should treat this as a critical patch priority. Source: Bleeping Computer. Google Pixel 10 zero-click exploit chain. Google Project Zero researchers published a zero-click root exploit chain for the Google Pixel 10, demonstrating it is possible to achieve root access on Android from a zero-click context using just 2 exploits. The chain updates a previous Pixel 9 exploit that used the Dolby zero-click vulnerability. CVE 2025-54957, patched January 2026, combined with a local privilege escalation in the Big Wave driver. For Pixel 10, the researchers ported the Dolby exploit by updating offsets and adapting to RET PAC protections that replace stack protector checks. However, the Big Wave driver does not ship on Pixel 10. Working with Jan Horn, the researchers audited the new VPU driver at /dev/VPU used for the chips and MediaWave 677 DV silicon on the Tensor G5 chip, and discovered an exceptional vulnerability in just 2 hours. The VPU driver directly exposes the chip's hardware interface to user space, including letting user space map the chip's MMIO register interface. A flaw in the VPU mmap handler allows unbounded physical memory mapping, enabling attackers to map the entire kernel image, including text and data regions, into userland and overwrite any kernel function to gain kernel code execution. EPSS score for CVE 2025-54957 is 0. 0, 8th percentile. Action: apply Android security updates immediately to all Google Pixel devices. Organizations issuing Pixel phones should prioritize May 2026 security patch level, SPL, updates. The Dolby vulnerability, CVE 2025-54957, was patched in January 2026. Devices running SPL December 2025 or earlier remain vulnerable. While the VPU driver vulnerability has not been assigned a CVE or common vulnerabilities and exposures, yet expect a patch in upcoming Android security bulletins. Implement mobile device management, MDM, policies to enforce minimum security patch levels and alert on devices running outdated firmware. Source: Google Project Zero. Next section, General Security News. Ruby gems abused as data dead drop. Security researchers at Socket discovered a campaign dubbed Gem Stuffer, where threat actors published over 100 malicious packages to the Ruby gems registry, abusing it as a data dead drop rather than for malware distribution. The packages contain scrapers targeting public-facing UK government servers in the Lambeth, Wandsworth, and Southwark districts of London, collecting council calendar pages, agenda listings, and committee links. Scraped data is embedded into gem archives and pushed back to Ruby gems using hard-coded API keys, with attackers later downloading packages to extract the data. No command and control infrastructure is needed. The packages received few or no downloads and contain payloads that are repetitive, noisy, and unusually self-contained. Some samples create temporary Ruby gems credentials under /tmp, override home, build a gem locally, and push it to Ruby gems. .org, while other variants skip the GEMS CLI and post archives directly to the Ruby GEMS API. The campaign coincided with an apparent coordinated spam publishing campaign against Ruby GEMS, though Socket did not directly link the two activities. The threat actor's motivation remains unclear, as the scrapers target public data and show worm potential without attempting to infect other systems or distribute malware. Action: Ruby developers should audit dependencies for unexpected gems with unusual publishing patterns or minimal downloads. Review Ruby GEMS API key usage and implement credential rotation policies. Monitor for gems that contain data collection scripts, hard-coded credentials, or automated publishing capabilities. Organizations using Ruby GEMS should implement supply chain security scanning to detect anomalous packages before they enter build pipelines. This campaign demonstrates creative abuse of package registries for C2+ data exfiltration. Source: Dark Reading. Healthcare lab fined for security failures before cyber attack. The Dutch data protection watchdog ruled that healthcare research agency Bevelkingsonderzoek Nederland failed to meet data security requirements before a cyber attack in August 2025 that affected 850,000 women who underwent cervical cancer screening. The agency paid the Nova ransomware gang's initial ransom demand, which Nova confirmed receiving, but the criminals then demanded additional payment after learning the lab had contacted police. The regulatory finding establishes that organizations can face penalties not only for data breaches, but also for inadequate security measures in place before attacks occur. Action: Healthcare organizations should conduct security audits focused on pre-breach compliance with data protection regulations. Document security controls, risk assessments, and remediation efforts to demonstrate due diligence. Implement incident response plans that address ransomware payment decisions and law enforcement coordination. The case demonstrates that paying ransoms does not guarantee data protection and may invite additional extortion attempts. Source: Data breaches. Net. UK regulator fines water company for cybersecurity failures. The UK Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, fined utility company South Staffordshire Water £963,900 after a cyber attack that ran from September 2020 to July 2022, resulting in users' personal information being extracted and published on the dark web. The fine was issued on May 7, establishing a precedent for critical infrastructure operators failing to maintain adequate cybersecurity controls over extended periods. Action: Utility and critical infrastructure operators should review cybersecurity compliance with sector-specific regulations and data protection laws. Implement continuous monitoring to detect intrusions before multi-year persistence occurs. The 2-year attacker dwell time suggests fundamental detection and response failures. Conduct tabletop exercises focused on early breach detection and containment. Source: Data breaches. Net. Next section: Patch priority. Microsoft DNS and NetLogin. Patch CVE 2026-41096, DNS heap overflow, CVSS 9.8, and CVE 2026-41089, NetLogin stack overflow, CVSS 9.8, on all domain controllers and DNS servers. Both allow unauthenticated RCE over the network. Outlook, deploy CVE 2026-40361 patch immediately. Zero-click RCE via malicious email affects all Outlook clients. Mitigation, set Outlook to render emails as plain text. Linux kernel, apply Fragnesia, CVE 2026-46300, patches to all Linux systems. Universal local privilege escalation to root. Mitigation, rmmod esp4 esp6 rxrpc breaks ISEC and AFS. Exim mail servers, update to Exim 4.99.3 on all GNU TLS builds. CVE 2026-45185 allows unauthenticated RCE on mail servers with startles and chunking enabled. Windows BitLocker, apply KB 5089549 to Windows 1125H2 to fix April update boot loop issue. Remove problematic group policy on Windows 10 and Server until patches are available. That concludes today's cyber threat brief. From Carolina Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.